if everybody's okay with it, I would like to move on to the second contribution. You're going to stay with us, of course, Stephen, so that we can have you on the panel in a moment. And we're going to move on to Paul McKinlay. Paul McKinlay is VP Communications at Cimpress and Vista, better known as Vista, a global company that is basically serving lots of companies with facilities to communicate and so forth. He can explain to us. The nice thing that Paul can say is that he's the first head of remote working in the company. A lot of people would dream about having this kind of title and opportunity. And he has been very instrumental, and it seems to me has had a lot of fun basically directing the company towards remote first. And we're very, very pleased that with all of his enthusiasm, he's going to share some of that with us. This is going to be done under the form of a discussion, a dialogue, an interview, call it what you want, together with Andy Lake. So I will leave Andy to fire off the questions in the order that he wants. Thank you very much, and thanks already for your answers, Paul.
Thank you very much, Philip. And welcome, Paul, to the Smart Work Network. First of all, can you build on Philip's introduction and tell us a bit more about yourself and about Cimpress and Vista?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. Me less so. I've been with the company 11 years now. I came out of retail. I was born in Canada, grew up in the UK, used to run supermarkets. I've done lots of different things, ended up in communications. And I remember being asked to take on a communications role by the CEO of Asda at the time. You might have heard of them, the people on the call. And I said, if you want me to leave the company, just tell me, because I didn't feel like it was a place where I could add tremendous value and make a difference. The fifth time he asked me, I figured I was going to have to do this. And so I moved into communications and have loved being in communications ever since, realizing all of the levers of the business I've been able to pull over the years. Like I said, I joined 11 years ago, Cimpress, which was Vistaprint at the time. Moved to Paris with my family. We were there for 4 years. And I'm speaking to you now from just outside of Boston, Massachusetts in the US, where we've lived for the last 7 years. Cimpress is a global company. We have 14,000 people, a dozen different go-to-market businesses, all e-commerce. For our European audience, you might have come across, Vistaprint is all over Europe as well as all over the world, but we also have PixArt Printing out of Italy, Easy Flyer, and Exa Group out of France, Dropwork Deal and Print Deal in Italy, Trade Print in the UK, lots of other brands, predominantly using the techniques of mass customization to produce very inexpensively marketing materials for small businesses in quantities as low as 1. Right.
And before we moved into remote first model of your company, I think it was quite a traditional company, wasn't it? What inspired this change, and what does it actually mean in practice?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, you're being polite. I think we were remote averse before the pandemic. So remote working was not encouraged. There were a few people who worked remotely, but generally, if you are a brilliant contributor for several years and then say, hey, I have to move because of a reason and we don't want to lose you, then there's an opportunity to work remotely. But for the average team member, working remotely was not an option. So what happened? We went from remote averse to remote forced, like everybody else, on March the 11th of last year, and went home with our laptops to hide under our beds and hope everything would be all right. Thankfully, we were technically able to operate efficiently because of the tech infrastructure that we had. I should say, by the way, I'm talking very specifically about those people in the organization, and there are about 3,000 that I look after who are remote first team members. We have a large number of manufacturing team members, and all credit to them who showed up in the manufacturing plant every day while we were all hiding under our beds, and they were the people making the items for the customers that we could not have done without. But yeah, we went to remote forced, and 4 or 5 months into that process, so August of last year, we kind of looked at each other, we took feedback from our team members, and everyone realized it was going really well. And we made an early decision, and credit to our leadership team, we're still founder-led. And so Robert, our founder of 20 years ago, and his executive team made a decision to make remote first permanent last August. When we announced that, it was a gift to our team members of certainty at a time when there was zero certainty in the world. And so they were so happy that they could organize and plan for the future of where they wanted to live, and childcare and homeschooling and all of the things going on at that time. And we have gone from strength to strength in remote first ever since. Yeah.
So the term remote first, it's not remote only, is it? So what's the first about it? How does that work?
Yeah, so traditionally we operated the company office first. So everything was designed to work for somebody sitting in a cube in an office. And that was the way we operated the business. But by calling it remote first, we wanted to change everyone's mindset to look to revisit every process, policy, procedure, and way of working to work first for the people who were like me, sitting in an office at home, and then also work for an office-based or manufacturing plant-based population. And so it was kind of a complete flip of the way we'd thought about organizing the business. And so we don't require any of our remote first team members to be anywhere at any point in time on a regular basis. When you do that, you lose, in my view, 95% of the benefits of remote working. If I have to be somewhere one day a week, then I can't live 1,000 miles away from that somewhere. And so we really wanted to give absolute freedom to team members to work where they wanted to work within some guardrails. But you're right, we're not remote only. And so we did keep some collaboration spaces, and we do see in-person collaboration as an important part of our company and the culture we want to create and the way we want to work going forward.
Yeah, but this must involve quite a big cultural change. And did everyone go along with it? Were there line managers who still wanted to see their people? And if so, how did you take them on the journey?
Yeah. So I think what was really cool is when Philip mentioned it earlier. So I never dreamed of being a head of remote as well as a head of communications, but was really interested in it. And to be quite honest, saw it as a fantastic way to extend my career, because it's definitely a place where people are learning skills and being really in demand. And so I've learned so much in the last 18 months that I feel like I've got a new lease of life in my job and in my career to really help the team transition. When I went to see Robert, our founder, and say, hey, you want me to do this? What is it you're trying to achieve? I was expecting him to say, can we just stick some sticky plasters over some of these problems that people are finding? Can we help people to work remotely, but can we just fix some things? And he surprised me, as he always does, and said, I want remote first to become a towering strength of our culture and a competitive advantage. And those two things just changed the whole mindset of everyone involved in this transition and caused us to build for fantastic team member experience. And I think the fact that we were doing that has helped us so much with the change management, the trust, the empowerment people feel, and the way we've layered in ways of working and benefits after benefits, all geared to create a great remote working environment, but also geared to create a great team member experience. And that gives us so much credit with our team members that they've been, super patient with us as we've worked through what we've needed to do, but also highly supportive of the direction of travel. Considering when they were hired to work in a piece of real estate 5 days a week. And all of a sudden they were then in a job which was, please don't come near a piece of real estate ever unless you really want to. Yeah.
So was there a big appetite for continuing then? Stephen showed a slide which showed a very considerable appetite in the European Commission. And is that something you'll continue to monitor, how this all goes?
Yeah, it's very in line with what we saw. So we saw 6% of people when we surveyed who wanted to work in an office 5 days a week, which is 3 times his 2%, but still pretty low number. And since we've reopened collaboration centers, and of course, COVID is still having an impact on these numbers, but the people showing up and using them are very, very small numbers, and they're being used for people who don't have a great home working space and want to go use a desk and have some quiet time. They're being used for people who are, I don't know, renovating or have a power cut and need to just go have that convenience rather than work in a coffee shop, which is also fine if they want to. But the biggest use of collaboration spaces we're seeing is for in-person collaboration, surprisingly enough. So people are bringing teams together for either project working or for team building or just for fun and social events. And for those teams that can do that, it's been really good. But we're not seeing huge take up because people are generally happy working remotely.
So has this involved changes to the real estate, both in terms of the design and the amount?
Yeah, for sure. We've downsized significantly. So in this area of the US, we have about 800 team members. And so we had, I think, 300,000 square feet of office space going into the pandemic. During the pandemic, we saw an opportunity to get out of that lease and to find something much more suitable for where we thought the journey was going. We now have 75,000 square feet. Actually, I think that's 3 times bigger than we need, but it was still a fantastic move that we were able to make. And importantly, the driver for that was not, of course, there's a good outcome there with cost saving, but that wasn't the primary driver. The primary driver was, let's have space that we can really use well to collaborate in the future model that we see. And so we took the smaller space, but then we cleared it out and created, for the most part, 2 different types of space. One is collaboration and social, and we have a whole floor of sofas and whiteboards and all sorts of other fun things for teams to come together. And then we have a floor of hot desks that people can book when they want to find some focused time and come in and work in a more traditional office environment. But that's just our biggest previous centers of high density populations. We've hired so many people nowhere near any real estate now. And so most of those people have never seen a piece of Cimpress or Vista real estate.
So how's that working out with the people who have been recruited since? Has it been a big attractor factor, for recruitment, and how do they interface with the kind of culture of the organization as well?
Yeah, there's so many things we are still. I'm telling a very positive story here because I love the progress that we've made, but we have so much to do, Andy, and I definitely don't want to send a message here that we're perfect and everything is great. There's so many things we need to work on, and one of them is continuing to improve the onboarding and integration process of new team members. And we're hiring like crazy, and 70% of the 300 people we hired over the last 3 or 4 months said they came to us because of the flexibility of remote working that the opportunity presented. Most of them are nowhere near a piece of real estate that we ever had. We employed people in 9 US states and 1 Spanish region pre-pandemic, which is now 14 regions of Spain and more than 30 US states.
Wow.
And by the way, lots of other countries as well. And so the access to talent, the cognitive and cultural diversity that's brought to teams. And the great thing about hiring people remotely now is that they are coming to us knowing they're going to be remote team members, and they just have a different frame on this. This isn't a change for them. This is I really want this. How do I find a remote role? And so it's not that our existing team members have been anything other than positive about the change, but it is still a change for them. Whereas for these new team members, they're coming wanting to work like this. Yeah.
And you've still got your hands-on workers that you mentioned, the people in the production centers and so on. How have they reacted to people being on this more distributed basis and getting all this new technology? And are there any forms of flexibility that you've introduced for them?
I think that's an awesome question, and it's something we've had to be very mindful of, even though our core focus is our remote first team members. We operate within a business where there are team members who are not remote first. And so our goal to do no harm, to not create inequity, to add a fantastic team member experience to remote team members while making all of those things available where possible to other team members has always been front of mind. And so, for example, throughout the whole of last summer, we from July through to September, we gave everybody Friday afternoon off wherever they are in the world. And so essentially it was a 4.5 day work week. We called it recharge time. Actually, many people used it to catch up on work, to get focus time, to review documents that they hadn't had the opportunity to do, or to set themselves up for the following week. But it gave them what they felt to be a fantastic weekend as a result, because they weren't feeling under pressure about Monday or about things they needed to do at the weekend. And so we introduced that for remote team members. Clearly, you can't shut down a manufacturing plant on a Friday afternoon and stop making products for customers. And so we gave the challenge to our manufacturing leaders to say, look, we're giving this time to remote first team members at the same time, so that their inboxes are not being filled while they're trying to be off. Please, could you find a way to implement this in manufacturing in a way that works for you? And so trying to maintain equity of the benefits has been important, even though equity isn't the same as identical.
Yeah, I like the approach of setting a challenge to get people to think innovatively about it. Finally, we're coming to the end of our time. How would you summarize the benefits? What would be your kind of 1, 2, 3, and what sort of key messages would you provide for other organizations who are considering a remote first approach?
We talked about some of them, Andy. So I'll start with talent access and attraction. I mean, we have 300% increase in inbound applications to where we were pre-pandemic. And as I said, a lot of that is due to people wanting a remote role. We keep hearing about the Great Resignation. We're feeling some of that with the inbound applications, but we're not feeling it in people leaving the organization. And so that feels like a great benefit. Then existing team members have had such a big bump in engagement through us verbally and vocally driving a focus on work-life harmony. It's very common to talk about work-life balance, but to me that sounds like a precarious tightrope where with a large fall on either side of it. Whereas work-life harmony is sometimes you have to work really hard in your week, and you should absolutely expect to get that time back. And so encouraging people to have a real focus on well-being and their loved ones and their other priorities in life has enabled them to be even more productive and to deliver. We really want Working Here to become ultimately a masterclass in remote working skills that people will need for the rest of their career, wherever they go. And we want to feel good about having taught those. And as for key messages for others, I'm really cautious about sounding like I'm telling anyone how to run their business. But for us, this ongoing transition has done more for our business than I think I've seen in any other change in the 11 years that I've been here. And I feel so privileged to be part of the team helping team members to make this transition.
Well, that's great. Well, thanks very much, Paul, for your insights. I'll just hand back to Philip to see if we want to deal with any questions now.
Yes, well, there's actually one question that most probably you should answer now, if you don't mind, Paul. I mean, people are of course asking, what about mental health? I think it's well known that for people which are staying more than, say, 3 days full-time from home, that there is facets of isolation and other nuisances that pop up that needs to be carefully watched to make sure that people don't have negative consequences of it. Well, what is your organization doing about that, if anything?
Yeah, I think there's a framing on this. I completely accept it's a problem and completely believe we need to focus on it. I think that the traditional focus on this and the easy focus is, we're creating some isolation and mental well-being issues. Let's give people a day off this month or whatever. And really you're applying a fix to something you've created as an organization. I think if you can change that mindset to be one of how do we help our team members to really prioritize well-being when they need to prioritize well-being, by having non-linear work days, by encouraging less meetings and having much more asynchronous work, by prioritizing family time, by just encouraging them to make friends in their communities. You know, you're not isolated when you're working from home unless you're working 12 hours a day and you can't do anything else. Yep. If you can go to the coffee shop and the tennis club and the gym and go see your family for lunch, then I personally would rather, I love my work colleagues, but I personally would rather spend time with the people I choose rather than the people my company chose for me to be friends with. And so really helping people to reframe the opportunity that remote gives them and empower them to spend their time in ways that they want to spend their time, for me, is a bigger solution than a day off a month to fix the problem we caused in the other three and a half weeks.
Wonderful. Thanks ever so much, Paul. It's very inspirational. It's contagious, and that's what we want. We would like more people to hear about your drive and your experience and the wonderful benefits. So with that in mind, and of course, you're going to hang on for us for the panel discussion, I'm now going to go back to Andy. Andy,